he asked me about kind of what I was looking to do further on, and if sports was really the thing I wanted to do. He said he actually had an opportunity for me in minor league baseball with a network connection he had, and he said, which still holds true for me today, is if you can work in minor league baseball, you can really work anywhere.
Welcome to episode 136 of The Route, presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. As always, a few things to cover before we get into today's guest. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see at the top hand corner here, it says The Route. Underneath that, it says at The Route Sports. So that's our social handle on all platforms. And the one that's kind of cool is LinkedIn, right? So most podcasts are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. We're on all those at The Route Sports, but specifically we're on LinkedIn. And that's where you can maybe start your network, grow your network, maintain it, etc. It's a good place considering the discussions we're having, the people listening, right? Most of you are probably on the podcast or are on LinkedIn, or you're probably wanting to start it. So check us out there at The Route Sports, and that's all platforms. You'll see these magazine covers when we launch the episode where it's unique to each guest. You get a little insight into what it's about. And then also on the other platforms, you'll then be able to see clips from each episode. So it gives you a little teaser into what's being discussed. So check us out there at The Route Sports. And as I mentioned briefly at the beginning, we're on video as well, and that's through our YouTube channel, specifically the White Whale Marketing YouTube channel, and we have the Route playlist there for the last, I believe, 80, maybe 100 episodes that we've had with video. And that's White Whale, MKTG, and then there's the Route playlist there. And in addition to that, for audio, I believe we're on 8 to 10 audio platforms now, and that's Amazon, Google, Spotify, Apple, and all the other good ones. So check us out there. Like, follow, rate 5 stars. Allows the podcast to grow a bit easier. And that way we can continue doing this and spreading this great insight that we're getting from these amazing guests. So please take the time to do that. But with that now said, we can now get into today's guest. So I'd now like to welcome someone who has worked in sales for baseball, the Nashville Predators, Tesla, US Foods, and now Monumental Sports and Entertainment as their Director of Franchise Partnership, Varney Vale. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the way every podcast has gone for the last 136 or so, take me through your route. So where did it begin and how did we get to where we are today?
Thanks again for having me. Tried and true for, a lot of sports professionals out there. I did not start going to college for sports. So I went a little bit of a different route. I actually started in culinary and hospitality, got my associates, and then as I was moving to get my bachelor's degree, I pretty much started talking with a lot of my professors on things I wanted to do. I feel like I wanted to get a little bit out of the culinary world, and through one of my professors, Jeff Mann, he actually gave me some opportunities to start trying out in sports and event management, which is what I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in. And kind of through that experience, it was really great. I was able to do all sorts of shows, from comedy shows to foundation charity events, and kind of moving into my next thing, my next session. He asked me about kind of what I was looking to do further on, and if sports was really the thing I wanted to do. He said he actually had an opportunity for me in minor league baseball with a network connection he had, and he said, which still holds true for me today, is if you can work in minor league baseball, you can really work anywhere, which is very true. Anyone that's worked in minor league sports, let alone baseball, it's hectic, it's crazy, it's go, it's fun, it's all hands on deck. From my experience, 1 second you're setting up chairs for a group outing, then you're in the box office printing off tickets, and then you're running onto the field to put the tarp on when it's torrential downpour. in the middle of the third inning. So really through that experience, I really fell in love and had a passion for sports. And my main role with minor league baseball team, the Charlotte Knights in Charlotte, North Carolina, was actually transitioning from their old stadium in Fort Mill, South Carolina, to their new stadium in Uptown Charlotte, which is still there today, which is a very unique opportunity. You know, obviously, stadiums and properties in our industry is very unique, and be able to open one was a very amazing experience. And going through this processes was great. And kind of through that, after the season was over, it's pretty much winding down my time in college, and I was looking for how to continue in sports. And a common theme in a lot of people in sports career path is networking. So my one of my professors got me the internship in baseball, and then my boss in baseball got me in touch with my soon-to-be director in Nashville, where I was in seasonal sales for the Nashville Predators. So moved over to Nashville and started literally in the basement selling season tickets in SEC football country when the Preds were not super hot. So it was a very unique, challenging experience, but it really solidifies some key themes in the industry, which is work ethic, really going above and beyond for people, really, you know, finding new and different ways to connect with people, and putting out a great product. You know, a lot of times not everyone can work for the big market teams and teams that go to Cup finals and NBA finals all the time. So finding ways to engage with fans and find new ways to get people butts in seats is a common theme. And you know, we had to find new ways to do that. And so luckily I was able to continue throughout the Preds organization. Started, like I mentioned, in sales, and then went to ticket service, where I was the coordinator, and then eventually the manager of our season ticket and service team, where we managed really a huge book of over 40 million in season ticket members and groups and all sorts of things. And that's challenging. It's you know, it's really where you skin your knee quite a few times and learn a lot about individuals that, you know, spend money, make large commitment to these professional teams. But yeah, kind of through there, really early on, I kind of identified partnerships as an area that I think I could really excel at and really wanted to be a part of. I really enjoy the relational side of corporate partnerships and building unique and amazing platforms for companies to engage with communities and target audiences, and really for the audience members, you know, really being able to do these once in a lifetime unique opportunities for them is amazing. So I kind of had to make a tough decision to end my time with the Preds and actually move back to my home area in Washington, D.C., and decided to go back and go back to school and get my MBA. And kind of did that around a unique time of the start of the pandemic. So obviously sports was hit pretty hard. So I had to pivot a little bit. I worked with Tesla, as you mentioned, in renewable sales and vehicle sales, and then U.S. Foods as well, doing territory management consulting with restaurants and hospitality groups, which is, again, still a very unique industry to be in at that time. But the main thing is I was working and getting my MBA at University of Maryland in marketing and data analytics, which is a separate conversation of working and speaking with a couple of my mentors and network professionals on getting my MBA in sports management or in business and administration, MBA in marketing and stuff. And it was a hard decision, but I felt like getting it in marketing and data analytics and not sports would make me a better, more well-rounded professional and not just 100% sports focused. And I think me personally, nothing against the sports management MBA, but I find at times a lot of people that I know it's very heavily used for networking. Like they know the professors and know people through the MBA program, but for me, I really wanted to gain knowledge and learn things and find new ways to do things. And being able to bring that into a team is very unique opportunity, and it kind of led me back to back into sports where I'm at now with MSC, Monumental Sports Network or Sports Entertainment. We actually do have a network side as well, but we manage and own Washington Capitals, Washington Wizards, Washington Mystics, several esports franchises. As I mentioned, we just started our own media network, or expanded our media network, which has been a huge thing for us. And then we have a couple properties here as well. So a lot of things on our umbrella, where I manage and handle corporate partnerships for all of our franchises. But yeah, long time coming, a lot of work to get here, but it's been a journey.
Yeah, yeah, Varney, that's awesome. There's so much I want to get into there, and appreciate you sharing your route. And yeah, as you're just mentioning there at the end, I know when I first saw Monumental Sports and Entertainment, I think your banner on LinkedIn kind of has all the different logos, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember it was like, wow, that's a lot of different
Yeah.
teams, properties, etc. Just kind of overlooked. But before we kind of get into that, I like to go into the past, and we'll work our ways back. So I think one of the first things you were mentioning is you were initially in culinary, right? In the culinary space. How
Oh,
would I know you kind of touched on it, but was there a reason you went there? What was maybe like I remember when I was in accounting, as I was talking to you before we started recording, I was never really in love with it. I thought I would like it. And I remember there was a split moment and I was like, nope, I'm out. And that was as soon as they offered me a full time position. I was like, no, I quit. Like I'm leaving and I know it's time for sports marketing.
yeah.
Um, was there one of those moments for you when you were in the culinary space?
Oh, absolutely. I, like a lot of people, had a strong passion for cooking early on through my mom and grandma. Both my grandmas are very entrenched in the culinary field, so the passion for me was pretty early, and
Mhm.
I made a very unique decision early on in my life that I wanted to follow my passion and not. Nothing against accounting. My brother went into accounting, so but
Yeah.
follow my passion and try to make a career out of it. So I started cooking at a very high end restaurant group very early on in my life. I it was in high school. I think I was 15 or 16, and so yeah, kind of through that. Like I mentioned, I went to culinary school, started going through that. I was doing a lot of very cool things. I was getting very big. I actually had a externship with Walt Disney World in Orlando, where I was at the Food and Wine Festival. I was one of the chefs and was able to grow a lot through that. Um, but for me, and it's an area that a lot of people think about that work in sports is family. Culinary
Mhm.
field, especially cooking, it's very taxing on for individuals, families. Being able to that number of hours, number one, the commitment and everything to that. So uh, made that tough decision, pretty much at the height of my culinary career, to look at other opportunities because I knew family meant a lot to me, and I wanted to have a career and opportunity to be home for my kids and not have to work every weekend, which
Mhm.
it's funny that I went into sports, but
Yeah.
for me, the work ethic and the time commitment for my career was never in doubt. But
Mhm.
I wanted to find something that I felt was a little bit more suitable for my future family.
Sure. No, and that makes a ton of sense, and probably kind of leads into my next question perfectly, where you're talking about, life being essentially a chef, right? Just in regards to the timing and all that. But then it's funny enough, you're mentioning minor league baseball, right? Because I can only imagine, right, just the sheer number of games in baseball, and especially at the minor league lower level, it's all hands on deck too, right? Even though if let's say you're in sales or if you're saying you're going on and putting on the tarp if there's a game delay or rain delay, I should say. So that's kind of fun. Do you find there's like a I don't know if the word's easier, but more manageable balance maybe is the best way to say it within sports than cooking.
Yeah, definitely more manageable. I think cooking and culinary, it's obviously your high points. It's year round. There's no off season, as
Hmm.
you can imagine, and really, you're working Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to you're getting off at 12, 1 a.m. But obviously sports, it's a little bit more it's much more formatted, and you have a true off season, and you kind of plan around that. But yeah, I mean, minor league baseball, it's I think I briefly mentioned it, some advice I was given, like if you can work there, you can work anywhere, because it really is. I mean, baseball in particular, it's you have a start time, but you don't know what end time it is. I mean, I've
Yeah.
had games where pitchers and pitchers are throwing everything, and maybe the other team's got like a early tea time or a late tea time or something, or they need to go to dinner early, so they're swinging at everything and they're ending the game in an hour and a half, 2 hours. Then there's games where we're in the seventh inning at 1 a.m. We're going into extras,
Hmm.
and you're just like, oh man, we have a game at noon tomorrow that we have to be back here. I might have to sleep in my car tonight and wake up and be right back at it. So baseball is very
Yeah.
unique in that sense. But like I said, it's a very unique opportunity, an experience that I knew if I could go in and crush it and really love it, I could do this at any level.
For sure. And that's kind of just crazy to think where I remember one of my first baseball experiences ever. Obviously, I'm from Canada, and my dad had a lot of work in Boston. So we went to a Red Sox game because obviously I always wanted to go to Fenway. And I remember the game was going on so long that I think they had an outfielder have to come in because they went through their whole bullpen, and they just couldn't get any outs. And it was I remember the game was going like 5 hours or something. Obviously, I'm big into hockey, being from Canada, and as much fun as it was near the end, it was like, oh, okay, like let's get this done with. So I completely get that where it ends up getting stretched out. Um, and I guess then just building on it, you're talking about, hey, if you can work in minor league baseball, you can kind of work anywhere. Um, what was that kind of experience like? And is that something where you feel it was good to have earlier on in your career, right? Where maybe it was kind of attached to like, hey, like if you can do this, you're good to go. Or do you find it's also maybe a career breaker? Let's say someone does it a little bit at, let's say at the age of 30, 35. Because I know I've seen and chatted with some people where once they get to that age and maybe they get into a lower league team at a higher level position, but then it just breaks their back and they're like, nope, I'm done with sports. I'm going to tech or something. So do you find it's maybe good if it's at the earlier end of your career?
Um, I, it's I think that's a tough question in the sense of it's very unique to the individual.
Mhm.
Will I say I feel it's easier at the early end of your career? Absolutely, just because you might be younger, might not have as many responsibilities and stuff. Like I said, I was finishing up college, so I had just gotten a little dog. That was the extent of my responsibilities at the time. But I have a few friends that are in minor league sports, and they're still in it today, and there's different levels to where you're at. Obviously, me being an intern, I was the guy that came in, you know, open eyed and wanting to do everything, wanting to have my hands on a little bit of every department, from sales, operations, grounds crew, partnerships. I was putting up logos in the outfield wall to like I said, to running and maybe turning on the popcorn machine every once in a while.
Yeah.
So it's very unique. But I love minor league sports. I think the experience is very intimate and so wholesome. There's always going to be a place for that. And for individuals, even later in their career, or if you're transitioning into sports, there's a lot of opportunities there. I think the biggest thing for me with minor league sports is it gave me the opportunity to have a hand in all the different departments, and that's kind of really
Mhm.
where I found partnerships was kind of the route that I found most apt to my skill set and kind of what I wanted to do. So I think for me that was probably the biggest opportunity was finding kind of what niche because most, big market teams, you're not able to, if you're in sales or you're in service, you really aren't going to have that many opportunities to work with the marketing team directly, or actually do marketing, or partnerships, or operations. So having that opportunity was very unique.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of something that's something relatable, at least from my end, I'd say, right? Where I think initially, especially coming out of school, is much more an idea of marketing, branding. Like I always thought it was so cool, right? Being able to have your fingerprint on essentially the brand and the team as a whole. But as I've kind of got that experience, and I would say even more so working at Atletico Autos, essentially a startup because it was their inaugural season, and having involvement everywhere. And sometimes, when I had a little bit of time in the afternoon, hey, let me help you sell tickets, right? And then just maybe helping out with partnerships because I was the one from Ottawa too. So then from that, that's when I kind of started to see more things. And obviously, once I started my business, that's all hats. That's all hats there, right? Like there's no choice really. And that's really where I kind of saw that, hey, like business development, the partnership side is really what I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I
Definitely.
guess building on that, pardon?
Yeah, definitely agree.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, one of the things I wanted to kind of get into as well, I think you were discussing this going into your experience within baseball, but as well as once your college ended, and as you said, everyone really talks about it. It's all about networking, right? I know you said your baseball role came from your professor kind of helping you with that, and then your role with the Predators came from your old boss helping you with that as well. Do you have maybe any tidbits? Because as I said, I think on a recent podcast too, the demographic of this podcast is more so like the 25, 35-year-old age range. So probably people already working within sports. Maybe they're about to get their first one or their first major role, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
like promotion. How do you go about that to network correctly where, your old boss, your professor, or a colleague will go to bat for you, let's say?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's probably, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, there's no industry really that's as network and close knit as sports.
Hmm.
So anyone that's had in some kind of extent in sports industry, is not only there, but a good reason that they're there in the position they're at is because of networking. Because
Hmm.
either someone they know that they worked with, or were able to network at an event with. I mean, again, literally throughout my career is all about networking. And I think the biggest thing for me has been genuine networking. I think it's very easy for people, just like job hunting, is to just kind of spray and pray and just, start sending a generic LinkedIn or email request to 15 different people. I've had instances where um, some, people have essentially sent a template intro email to 10 different people, and then 3 of them are in my department. So we're like, hey, did
Yeah.
anyone else get this email? And it just doesn't come off genuine. And I think there's a lot of stuff out there about proper way to network and stuff. And sports, as anyone, it's to me, it's probably one of the easiest to network, because we have a million games, we have a million concerts, there's plenty of opportunities. And if you make a genuine connection, or if you make a genuine outreach opportunity, you have a much more likely opportunity that someone's going to reply, because it's a lot of people in this industry are looking to pay it forward, because they most likely had to use their network to get where they're at today. So I know me, like, I get them a decent bit. And if it's something more than just, hey, I saw you work at Monumental Sports, would love to talk. That's
Yeah.
all good and great, but like then I'll get one that's like, hey, like, I love Monumental Sports. I love this activation you guys did with this corporate partner, X, Y, and Z. Would love to learn more about your work, and blah blah blah. Or example for this, I heard you on the Route podcast, and I heard you talk about your experience in minor league baseball, Nashville Predators, X, Y, and Z, and wanted to hear more about that. That's the kind of stuff that I think people are more apt to reply and actually engage with. I still do that today. I still listen to your podcast and listen to other podcasts or interviews or read articles about what's happening in the industry, and I'll reach out to people like, hey, I thought this was super unique and an amazing idea and opportunity. Would love to know how you got to that point about learning and wanting to do that with your team or organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you mentioned there, I had a brief experience with that, especially I find when you have that team logo or that larger property attached to the
Yeah.
amount of requests you get is significantly different. And then as soon as you maybe switch out of it, it changes completely, right? Where athletic, I was getting soccer players sending me things saying, hey, can you get me on the team? Different things like that, or like, hey, I want to pick your brain. And you're doing the same thing or even furthering it, but as soon as they don't know what the logo is, the requests don't come in as often. So it's funny how that ends up working too. And yeah, as you were saying, I think podcasts are a unique tool where I didn't even realize it when I started. I just wanted to kind of meet people and hear their stories. And as I've kind of gone on, I was like, wow, there's a lot of value on my end, just meeting these great people, hearing what they have to say. And then I talked to old guests and they're saying, hey, like now I'm going to meetings. People are like, oh, hey, I listened to you on the route. We have this in common. They have that base foundation, right? Where it's almost going into a meeting warm now rather than cold. So it's kind of cool how that ends up working out as well. And I guess building on that too, you're talking about that networking, and then that's how obviously it landed you to roll with the Nashville Predators. And I know you mentioned prior to recording Matt Harden, which is a previous guest of the route. He was one of your bosses there, and I remember he had a funny story just in regards to selling, hockey in the South, essentially, where I remember he was saying they were in a mall and he didn't sell any tickets, and he was like, "Oh, I don't know if this is going to take place." And then you kind of mentioned that too, right? You're selling hockey in the SEC country. So I was wondering, what was that like? Because obviously in Canada, I think it's a little bit easier, especially when there's this huge canal going through the city that turns into a skating rink. So I think that's a little bit different. But what was that like?
No, it was it was very unique. I know, obviously, still try to keep in touch with Nat Harden a lot. He's an amazing guy to learn from and work with. Very, very unique perspective on a lot of things. And I'm sure he'll be the first one to tell you he doesn't know. Coming into the Preds, he didn't know a lick about hockey and or any rules or anything like that. I think that's also I guess you could say a stigma in the sports industry. Like, I don't want to work for a certain organization because I don't know anything about their sport. When I started with the Preds, I mean, I knew baseline hockey. I knew a little bit. I played like 2 seasons when I was a kid. Could skate a little bit. I knew, Ovi and Crosby, and that was about it. And I mean, I immersed myself in hockey. I knew the Preds AHL affiliate. I knew their entire lineup. I knew their reserve players and bench players and almost all the teams on the AHL and OHL and X, Y, and Z. So, it's very unique in that sense. Hockey in SEC country, and where football is king, and even to that, baseball is pretty big in the South as well. And I mean, just colleges in general. Colleges is where what pulls a lot of the eyeballs and fan base. But for us, really, it was about when I started with the Preds, we actually weren't doing the best in the standings. So I think Nashville is probably one of the best, if not the best, in game presentation. Being able to make the product on the ice as fun and enjoyable as possible, to the point where almost all my years there, not to say people weren't there to watch the hockey game, but like sometimes you think it's just a big party and there's also a hockey game going on. And then, obviously when the team gets good, people get more engaged and you're able to really build and solidify your fan base, which obviously we had some amazing years there, with a cup final run. Really, like I mentioned, with Nat Harden in my early days, I mean, it's all about butts and seats, getting people into the game, because we knew the product that we were putting on, the entertainment value we were producing was next level, and we just had to get people in there to experience it. And obviously the arena has an amazing location right on Broadway, so that Saturday game, or even in Nashville weeknight game, right after the game, people were going right on to Broadway and having a couple beers and watching other NHL games and NBA games and stuff. So continue the party going and making that really a flagship location for entertainment. And the team performance will always follow you. And GM and coach and players, they'll produce on the ice. But really, for us, it was about making a product that you couldn't find anywhere else, kind of regardless of the outcome of the game.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And sometimes I feel like with this podcast, you always revert to sports in Ottawa. That's because there's a stadium right across the street, and that's why I'm going to refer to it. And it's just something that I'm able to experience even just as a fan. But as you're saying there, it's funny enough, it's almost like, let's say, the opposite here, right? Where you're talking about hockey, where maybe the crowd doesn't maybe know as much that's going on, but it's almost like a party in the stands. I feel it's similar here with football, right? There's a CFL team right across the street here. Everyone wears red and black flannel to the game. I've been to games with friends. Sometimes you're not even really end up watching the game, and then you're just watching the crowd where people are drinking beer out of boots, right? And it's more so just a party and that experience that's then going on where that ends up selling the sport, and then people become more knowledgeable about it with time. So I think that's super cool. And I guess then building on that too, you're talking about, right? Obviously, you were able to kind of progress and maybe learn a lot while at the Predators. Then you had to make the tough decision of leaving, going home, and then also starting your MBA. And that's something I kind of wanted to get into because I know, especially when we started the podcast, when maybe the listenership was a little younger, I'd say it was primarily, let's say, university students at the beginning. A lot of the questions that we'd receive on social media is, hey, how do you decide? At the time was undergraduate programs to go in. I obviously didn't feel educated enough to do that because I was like, I just did a business degree. I didn't even look into sport management because I wanted to have that all-encompassing business degree. But I think MBA is something important, right? Where maybe that's where people are looking for that second degree and what specifically to go into, right? I think that's where you're saying you had to decide that too, right? Sport management or more so marketing and analytics. How are you able to make that decision, right? Was there something, and you say you want to be more well-rounded, but was it a harder decision? And did you ever maybe say, hey, I'm going to go into sport management?
Yeah, definitely. I will say kind of twofold. It was the hardest decision, but it was also the easiest. Like I have a feeling most people, I didn't even know sports management was a thing. Even a degree when I was, looking at colleges, as a, aforementioned, went into culinary. I actually had that pretty much wrapped up and tight going into my junior year. So I was, one of those ones that never had that college application, Finanza, sending out to a bunch of colleges, and I had mine pretty much tied down early. But yeah, I didn't even know sports management was even a thing. I was 2 years into college, and I was told about my college had sports management and event and entertainment management. And I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I was like, that aligns with a lot of things I would like to do, and tried it out and it went well. But yeah, I mean, as far as post-grad degree, for me, there's in the sports industry, I feel like there's a threshold of kind of, certain departments require certain things. A lot of it is experience-based, and post-grad degrees, I feel, can definitely give you a jump start, whether it's networking or actual, not saying you don't get knowledge and experience through everything, but for me, I knew I had the experience already because I was already working in sports. And I knew I can network. For me, networking is something I knew I can control. I can, go to events, go to, all sorts of different games and network through LinkedIn and network through my own network. So I knew networking is something I can control. And I really wanted to, how can I stand out really from individuals that are similar to me? And I was like getting a very, thorough, unique knowledge and experience to actually getting my, direct MBA in marketing and data analytics, which I really do have a really strong passion for as well, which also aligned with my partnership ideas and global partnership department with, heavy in BI and strategy, and creating these unique, captivating opportunities and initiatives and experiences for companies and businesses and consumers. So I felt for me, ultimately, it made me a very unique, well-rounded professional. To when I was looking to get back into sports, I could really present myself in a very well-mannered way. Especially, probably one of the hardest things in sports is location. Obviously, I moved back home, to the Washington D.C. area, and there's only a select few of teams in every city. Obviously, I could go back to other cities and whatnot, but I knew, if I was looking at a couple of teams in this area, or getting back into sports, there's only a couple opportunities in this area, especially narrowing down to partnership experience departments. So for me, it was about how can I put myself in the best light, and I felt that was the key, and I absolutely loved it. I if you asked me a couple of years prior if I saw myself going back to school, I would say heck no. But I was able to meet a lot of amazing individuals, still keep in contact with a few today, through my MBA program. And obviously, they're not in the sports world. So getting their perspective, getting their ideas and stuff for me, and bringing that to a sports setting is, again, just another way I can help be unique and stand out, and bring innovative ideas, especially like in the tech world. Tech and sports is overlapping heavily now. It's the way that I feel the industry is moving. So being having a better mindset in that, I think is going to help me long term.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I don't know if it's just I've been picking guests where I get a lot of things that I feel like I can relate to, but maybe it's just also the podcast where people just take different tidbits. Where I feel like what you were saying there just at the beginning about the sport management program, I feel I was the exact same way. My heart the whole time in high school, I never, went away from the off beaten path. I knew I was going to business. I never even knew about sports business, sports management, whatever. And I feel like I learned about that halfway through, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was an option. And that's funny enough that you kind of had a similar sentiment. And then just kind of building on that as well, right? You were just talking about, well, one of the things, there's kind of two things I wanted to get into there. One was, you felt like you were able to really kind of carve your own niche, right? And almost, let's say, brand yourself well as a sports business professional, but specifically with maybe an analytics background or tech background too, where it's not just sports management and whatever else that kind of comes along with that. So I think that's kind of a cool, unique thing where I think maybe a lot of people are trying to look into, or I think even myself when I think about it is, hey, how do you stand out against the crowd in regards to maybe getting that job or being an asset to a team, right? Because if everyone has, I don't know, as an example, everyone has ticket sales experience within hockey, that's probably then going to be a little more difficult for the team to be successful. But if there's people coming from tech, maybe a bachelor's in whatever, an MBA in analytics and different things like that, and coming from different sports, I'm sure that then allows it to be um, much more successful. And then one of the last things that you kind of mentioned there, which I think is kind of a unique thing that I don't think is talked about enough, but probably should be, is in regards to sports, right? Unlike, let's say, accounting, that's what I always end up going back to. Every business essentially in Ottawa, in Washington, needs an accountant, basically, right? So there are a lot of roles available. Sure, same thing can be said for sales, but when you're specifically going within the sports industry, as you're saying, when you then look at, let's say, director of partnership jobs, the number in your city kind of dwindles fairly quickly. And if you want to have, let's say, that work-life balance where you're able to kind of develop a family, grow, and even just kind of share those experiences with your friends and family, it gets a little difficult. So, do you mind maybe getting into that? Because that's something I find even personally I've thought of myself where, being in Ottawa, 5 hours down the road, we have Toronto where a ton of opportunities are. Montreal is also a big city that's close by. And then Ottawa, there's a couple of teams here where, if you stay in town, you have very limited options. So it's kind of maybe just understanding and balancing, hey, to go, to not to go, and pull a
Mhm.
little Romeo and Juliet there.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, for me, sports has, taken me I'm still, I view myself still, midway through my career, midway in my career, having like, 10, 11 years experience in it. And it's taken me to three major cities, from Charlotte to Nashville to DC. And so, from that standpoint, I definitely do feel, it's a very transient industry where, in order, I would say few people have the opportunity to stay in one organization and continue to grow from within. And to those people that are able to do that, that's amazing. It's not saying that people that don't do that aren't great at their job or whatnot, but a lot of times you do kind of have to go, especially in most instances, you have to go where the opportunity is. Like I mentioned, my time in Nashville, I didn't have the opportunity to move to partnerships. There just wasn't one available, and I knew for myself I didn't want to go into that following season with the Preds at my position, and then if an opportunity came about, leave in the middle of the season and leave my team high and dry in that sense. So I knew if I had to leave, it had to be in the off season where the team and my boss then had opportunity to essentially replace me and make sure everything's kosher before the season started. So um, it is very hard in that sense, but also one thing that I've kind of grown to know over time, through my own experiences and also a lot of my network and friends that I know, there's a whole nother level to the, quote unquote sports industry that is very unique. I mean, obviously agencies and brands are probably the two other biggest things where it's, I would say, sports adjacent, where, obviously brands are everywhere. Brands are in almost every major city, marketing brands, PR brands, or brands, I mean, marketing firms and PR firms are in every major city, and brand as well. Obviously, DC is very unique. We have a lot of brands in this area, but almost every major city has very large, unique brands, and a lot of those brands, work with sports teams, work with organizations, and there's opportunities there that translate very well to sports teams. So the idea that there's only in Ottawa or DC or whatever city, there's only 4 or 5 professional sports teams at different levels of professionalism. There's so much more to that as well. Obviously, one example is Geico has their headquarters just outside of DC here in Maryland, and Geico is one of the biggest international companies here. So I wouldn't say, I would say for individuals, like, have that kind of open-mindedness and kind of think outside the box and not just singular focus sometimes with teams, because most teams are gonna look to hire in the off season. So those 8 to 9 months during the season, there's probably going to be very, very few opportunities available. And if unfortunately have something where you need a job and you're looking sooner than later, or if you're graduating early or something like that, it's you have to look at what opportunities are available then.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And and I think that's something too, especially when you start off your career, you probably don't realize you're like, hey, I want to work into sports. And then you almost kind of do I think a lot of times when people first think of sports, they're like, oh, I want to be a GM of a team, right? And like, oh, there's only 30 NHL jobs. And when you translate it to the business thing, maybe you have the same mindset. But then, as you're saying, right, there's so many different, whether it's agencies, whether it's PR, whether it's even, for example, something that I kind of learned more recently in the last year or two was even in regards to like the city tourism, right, where they have a sports department there. Where I think that's kind of
Yep.
pretty cool, right, in regards to kind of getting the events into the city. So yeah, like you said, I think there's a ton of options. And before we begin to wrap up the podcast, I have kind of like 2 questions I'd like to get into. One is prior to the current role that you're in, and that's where obviously after your NBA, or maybe it's during it as well, you worked at Tesla and then also US Foods. Do you find maybe leaving that sports industry, and obviously I know it's the pandemic and things as well, and as you're mentioning, it's kind of tough if you need one at a certain moment. Do you find that let's say pause from the sports space provide you a lot of insight and maybe outside perspective, where maybe when you're in sports, you're almost in tunnel vision, you're only thinking at it from a sports mindset. But then when you kind of go into a different industry, it allows you to kind of maybe expand that a bit further and then look at it more so from an all-encompassing business view, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you make a great point. I think when individuals, and I think you see it more now than ever, people are getting hired on the sports teams um, that have never worked for a sports organization before, and I think kind of having that outside perspective and experience is very unique in a sports setting because people think, oh, it's Washington Wizards or Washington Capitals. It's
Yeah.
you have that kind of mindset, but really we're a business. We're here to
Mhm.
put out a product, produce a product on multiple levels, from in-game entertainment to operationally to media, TV wise. So really, at the end of the day, we are a multi-layered functional business. We just so happen to play an amazing sports and in games and have a lot of
Yeah.
fun doing it. So I think people do have that kind of narrow-mindedness in that sense where it's like, oh, that's all they do is go watch, Kyle Kuzma and Ovi, score goals,
Mhm.
which I definitely do, and I've seen quite a few Ovi goals, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. But yeah, I mean, it's I'm there at the games at night, but we're here early in the day, working 12, 13 hours throughout the day, and we're back here the next day, and have another game. For us, we probably have another game the next day, and it's basketball. Then the day after that, it's back to hockey. Then the day after that, we have a
Mhm.
concert. So, yeah, it really is multi-layered and multifunctional. But at the end of the day, we're a business, and our product is to put out this amazing product for fans. Fans, at the end of the day, is a centerpiece of everything we do. We wouldn't be here without fans. We wouldn't be here, able to do what we do without the fan base. So, I think for us, it's all about putting out the best product for the fans, and engage with them the most.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And even just, yeah, it's funny just you're saying there, one day it's one thing, then it's another sport, and then it's also a concert, right? And like you said, it's a business at the end of the day. I think that sometimes, I know I've had guests on the podcast where they're saying when sometimes they get maybe interviews for people coming out of school, they're like, hey, why do you want to work here? And they're like, oh, well, I'm a huge fan of the Dallas Cowboys, right? And
It's
then they're like,
the
well, that
worst
doesn't
answer.
really help. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then I think one of the other things that I don't know if it was something more recent, but probably more so near the beginning, was more so the experience. Let's say you get, and not to pick on any teams, but let's say selling the Dallas Cowboys football and then also just Toronto Maple Leafs hockey isn't the same thing of maybe selling, um, I don't know, what would be minor league baseball or maybe hockey in England, right? You having to sell that's a completely different experience where there's a huge demand and there's probably a waiting list to get into the Cowboys and the Maple Leafs in regards to ticketing. So it's a little bit of a different experience there too. And I think
Mhm.
that's kind of just building off of what you're talking about, getting that outside perspective too, and how you're seeing people now kind of translating that into the sports space. And then the question I do have before I wrap it up with those two questions I'd like to ask every guest at the end is in regards to your current role. I guess this is a two-part question. How did it come about in regards to how did you land it? And then secondly, do you mind maybe sharing what it entails as a whole?
Yeah, definitely. Well, again, the common theme place of networking. So obviously, I moved. I knew I was moving back to DC, and my team president with the Preds used to work with my now director or boss Pat Duffy. They used to work together back in Tampa Bay, and I was put in touch with him, and obviously, again, I kind of it all happened in the beginning of pandemic and COVID. So obviously no opportunities were available, but I was, keeping myself busy. I was, working with Tesla and US Foods and going to school and get my MBA. And so just kept networking with them and other, organizations in the DC area and with Monumental. And when a position came available, I, had a couple conversations and had a couple interviews and was offered the job. So I think being vigilant, I think there's, like I mentioned, genuine networking and not just
Mhm.
sending emails every week or anything like that, but being genuine about things and finding opportunities to engage and network with people is huge. So yeah, and then yeah, again, obviously don't recommend trying to get back into sports in the middle of a pandemic, and
Yeah.
knock on wood that never happens again. Um, but yeah, it's I think for me, my thought was always, what can I do today that's gonna put me in the best light tomorrow?
Mhm.
And again, that's really what led me to get my MBA. It was a busy 2 years for me. Got my MBA, got married, had a baby,
Wow.
moved back into sports, and all kind of still dealing with COVID and restrictions and stuff. So
Mhm.
it was yeah, it was a trying time, but I think again it goes back to work ethic and what can I do today that's gonna make me better. I think it's, especially in sports industry, a lot of people get burnt out, and I think that was one of the reasons why I did have a time and place where I was like, uh, is sports really what I want to do and where I want to be? And
Mhm.
my time outside of sports, I really like kept gravitating back to, and I was like, man, I miss those days. And I've had a lot of friends that got burnt out by sports and the number of hours and games that we work and events, and off season really isn't off season because you still have events. You got to renew accounts and renew this and that, and
Mhm.
prepare for the next year. So it's never truly an off season, but I think for me, being out of it gave me a unique perspective and kind of reinvigorated my passion to be back in it. And when I was given the opportunity to come back into sports, just trying to make the most of it. I think that's the most people can do at the end of it.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that makes a ton of sense. And I know you kind of made, let's say, a chuckle about getting into the sports industry during the pandemic. And I graduated just before that, and I think I probably mentioned this on a ton of podcasts, but we're having our own conversation here. And I think I was in the third round of interviews for one of the local teams here. I went to Toronto because I had more interviews, and I remember I parked the car, put it in park, and I opened my email, and then everything was shutting down. And I remember it was MLSE for the Raptors and all that. Everything's like, hey, everyone's getting sent home tomorrow. People I knew were like, hey, you should maybe try to contact those managers because they're not going to be in the office tomorrow because they're all going home. So I was like, oh, what do I do? And what a
Yep.
crazy time that was. So I can only imagine your experiences as well, especially with how much you had going on with kids, marriage, MBA, etc. So that's wild. And I guess just building off that two-parter. So what does your current role look like? So director of
Yep.
franchise partnership. What is that? What are you doing? What's the day-to-day, let's say?
Yeah, definitely. So as you kind of mentioned, with Monumental Sports Entertainment, we have a lot of properties, a lot of franchises, a lot of teams. So we have a lot under our umbrella, and I think for us, for what I do is corporate partnerships. So I'm working and reaching out to a lot local, regional, national brands and companies, and how can they use our teams, our platform, our properties to engage with the audience and stand out from the competition. So whether you're a van rental or some kind of B2B software or a government contractor, how can we use our properties to find new business, grow, um, grow your company, grow your base. Obviously, coming out of COVID, it was very difficult because companies, the mindset of companies is very much hold their funds to their chest because they don't, it's
Yeah.
so uncertain what the economy is going to look like and how the industries and things are going to go. We've had companies go bankrupt, go defunct, that have
Mhm.
partnerships with us over the last couple of years. So being able to, for me, it's always been about how can we make this a mutually beneficial partnership. I never want to go into it thinking that one or the other of the partnership is getting the upper hand or something, but I also want to go above and beyond for my partners, because I want them to have that strong foundational initial start with the partnership, and then how can we build on that. I think that's definitely key, because longevity in really anything from ticket sales to corporate partnerships, longevity is key. I think, there's the old adage, it costs more to get a new sale than it is to keep one, keep a partner. So I think for me, it's about building out a unique strong foundation or partnership for companies, and then how can we go through that, improve it, better it, and then build on top of that, to the point where we're doing 3x what we did the initial year, for example. So it's definitely a trying time, especially with the multitude of franchises. From I've had my conversations during the day stem from Washington Wizards, in-game features, to doing some social content with Elena Deladon and the Mystics, to holding some esports tournaments in our new District E venue here at Cap One. So it's really, for me, it's being a master of my craft and what we have to offer, try to know everything head to toe, especially with our new media stuff and new ventures that we're entering. So it's definitely a lot, but I think we have an amazing team, partnership team, marketing teams for all of our franchises and teams. So I rely a lot on them, and we just try to put our best foot forward and produce the best on court, on ice, on social, on digital, on TV, on radio, on podcasts, everything. So it's a lot of arms to reach out to.
Yeah, and to be honest, as you're kind of going through that, obviously just kind of referencing the time with COVID and how business were operating. I'm sure too that's where that MBA and that outside business experience really kind of provided some value for you, right? Where providing those numbers were almost more of it's not a guarantee, but it's more so a blanket of comfort, let's say, saying, hey, like there's these numbers that we can at least show you, and there's that proof is in the pudding, right? Where hey, we
Yep.
do have these things that you can build off of, rather than saying, hey, this is what we think will happen, right? Where there's something to work off of. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And
To kind of to that, for me, the adage I always go to is, or the one that I use, I don't know if I made it up or heard it from some podcast or something, but for me, you have to find that sweet spot. There's that sweet spot between data analytics and because data doesn't lie, numbers don't lie. I mean, they can lie, but for the most part, they don't. But numbers don't lie, and finding that sweet spot between numbers and having an emotional response in storytelling is the sweet spot, especially for me in partnerships. That's really what I look for, is how can we create this unique storytelling opportunity for this partner to engage with our audience and community, and what's our data points that back up everything that we're trying to produce. And that middle sweet spot is really where you find that strong foundational partnership that's you can kind of build on top of. But even to that, you can't control the economy, you can't control how businesses work. I've had companies replace CEOs, and now their whole game plan is completely defunct and starting from new. So you can't control that. You just kind of have to take it on the chin and hopefully continue that partnership at any level, and then hopefully you can kind of grow it back to where it was and continue from there. But yeah, it's I always love that adage on the sweet spot and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like that happy moderation or happy medium, right? Where it's not too much numbers or too much relationship based, but it's kind of something in the middle where you're kind of massaging both angles. And yeah, like you're saying there, funny enough, just where let's say a CEO kind of changes the whole strategy of the brand, and maybe they're not even really looking into sports partnerships anymore. And funny enough, something happened like that similar to me last week, where I'm speaking with someone, they're like, hey, we're doing a restructuring, I'll let you know afterwards. And then their email, I think a couple of days ago, was like, hey, this person no longer works here. So I guess they were end up part of that, right? So
Yeah,
funny how that ended up switching so
I mean,
fast.
yeah, and even to that, like anyone that's looking or interested in partnerships, it's when I'm having meetings and my colleagues are having meetings with companies, you never know who's on the other side. Sometimes I'm setting up the meeting with the person I've been contacting with for weeks or months or sometimes years, and then I set up the meeting, and then all of a sudden there's like 5 other people on the meeting. and you don't know who they are, what department they're in. And so there's been times early on where it's been like all those guys are data guys. They need numbers. They need to see numbers. Or they could be marketing people or digital people where they're like, I need a story. What can I sell? Like, how's this going to move the needle for them?
Yeah.
So that's why I really think it's you got to have both. You can't have one or the other. I've seen presentations where it looks like an Excel doc in PowerPoint, and it's the most mind-numbing, head-smashing thing I can think of. And then there's stuff that's just all about the glitz and glam and nothing, no substance to it. And so yeah, finding and that sweet spot's going to be unique to everyone. So really, it's finding your own good spot for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate all that insight. And man, I'd love to kind of get into, and maybe that's something you and I will have our own one-on-one conversation just in regards to the media side of even just the esports, because I find that space so interesting, especially with, let's say, traditional sport kind of taking that on now. But I guess we'll leave that for another day. But the last two questions I like to ask each guest at the end, just kind of put a nice bow on it, is we went through your whole route to date so far, right? And with that, I've been saying this for 136 episodes now. I'm going to live until I'm 103. I'm going to be on a rocking chair listening to this podcast, remembering some of the things I was able to do. Let's say the same thing takes place for you. You're 103. You're on a rocking chair, thinking about of all the different experiences you've had to date. Is there one story that's taken place already that's going to stand out to you? And at 103 on that rocking chair, you're going to be like, wow, that was a cool moment that I was able to work in sports for.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's everyone in sports knows there's a million memories you have, good and bad years. I mean, I know I can close my eyes and imagine exactly where I was when, the Preds, we were in the Stanley Cup finals, and unfortunately in game 6, we lost at home. And I remember exactly where I was standing, what section, the viewpoint, seeing the one that should not be named, holding the Stanley Cup on our home ice. And I remember that to date. But for me, the one that stands out was kind of a nuanced one. Kind of midway through my tenure with the Preds was I feel like a lot of people in the sports industry that have been there in organization for a while kind of get numb to things. And, it's like, oh, I got to go to another hockey game tonight. But you also have to realize, I'm working in the NHL. I'm at an NHL hockey game where not everyone can go to. Even once. So I had an instance where a father brought his daughter and they drove several hours to get to this hockey game. It was just a mundane hockey game against them. I don't even remember who it was, but it was, for me, it was just another run-of-the-mill hockey game. And, they had such a hard time getting into the city, and they had like car problems and stuff. And they missed, like, I think the first period. And you could just tell, like, their experience was just off to such a horrible start. And that's the last thing you want. I chatted with them for a minute, helped them get to where they were going. And luckily, the team that I had they were amazing and great. And we were able to do a couple fun things with them. With the Preds, we had a high five line where you could high five the players that are going on the ice in between intermissions. So I got them to go down for that for the third period. So the little girl was able to high five the players coming down the ice. I actually got her a jersey and a hat. And I told them, because they missed part of the game, I gave them my email and info, and I was like, let me know when you guys come back out or want to plan to come back out. I'll get you tickets to another game. And I think for me, being able to being in a position to do things like that for people that don't have that opportunity very often, for me, I had something like that happen to me when I was young, and it still sticks with me today. So the idea of me being able to do that for a little kid or individual is what I try to do. Not to say I look out for whoever's struggling the most and give them tickets to games, but you never know what people are going through or what their experience are, if they can, what their situation is. But I think always trying to lead with, how can I make your experience better, and how, what can we do to help? I think we'll go a long way for people.
For sure. No, that's an amazing story. And yeah, so I guess that was kind of going into the future 103-year-old Varney and that cool story. Now let's go back to, well, you're in culinary school, you're in a chef, you're 15, 16, as you were mentioning earlier. What's one piece of advice that you've learned so far throughout your career that you're like, hey, you know what? A younger version of myself should probably know this, or I wish I knew this earlier.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely a couple things. I think there's, you and I chatted before the pod a little bit about, kind of at what advice at what level. There's obviously different advice you can have at different levels of where you're at in your
Yeah.
career, from starting off to midway, or transitioning into a different career. Um, and I think some of them that for me that always stand out is experience. To me is key at any level. And people are like, oh, I can't, do an internship because I can't commit to that because I have to work or something, and totally understand that. And it's that never is the case, that you have to work for free to get experience.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many opportunities to work charity foundation or charity events or foundational events. There's always teams and organizations are looking for volunteers, and then connecting with people through there is always an amazing thing. Or so there's always, to me, experience is always key. If especially, like we mentioned, coming from an accounting background or culinary background, it's
Yeah.
like, all right, why sports? Why are you going to be in sports? But me being able to say, like, I've helped put on all these events and shows and do X, Y, and Z, allowed me to get where I was at and get those opportunities, and showed my commitment to what I wanted to do. And also too, that for me, it's always been about asking questions and asking the help. I think for me, especially early on, I always wanted to, my idea was to always learn how people do things and why they do things. And then how can I not adapt their style to mine, but what pieces of their style can I adapt and take for my own and mold into my own. I don't never want to copycat someone and everything they do, because it's not genuine to myself.
Yeah.
But I want it to be like, oh, you did this and you said that. Those I relate to a lot, and I think I can really take those on myself. And then to that, what not to do, and what what people do that I'm like, I should never do that, or I would never do that. Yeah, I think asking questions and asking to help. When you do have opportunity to be in an organization, even if I am on partnerships or sales
Mhm.
or service, if you have time to help, a lot of times some people will kind of sit there and twiddle their thumbs. But like, I know for me, like, I would always pop down to the box office, see if they need help with anything, pop down to events, see if they need help with anything. If you are ever just sitting there doing nothing, it's there's, in sports and in most businesses and companies, there's always something to do. But in sports in particular, there's usually some event that you're getting ready for, or people can help with anything that they're doing. So asking to help, and you get a network within your own company as well, which is
Mhm.
always huge for career advancements and stuff. So yeah, those definitely ring true.
No, those are great, and that's exactly why I like asking that just at the end, 'cause I think it kind of puts it all together well. And yeah, like you're just saying, I completely understand what you're talking about in regards to maybe taking things from others and molding it to yourself. Where I feel like that's what this podcast has then transformed into, right? Where you're speaking to so many of these great different people, and obviously the people listening to as well, they get to hear some of these insights. And then, as I was saying to you before the podcast, it really depends, who's listening, what they end up taking away from it, right? If maybe it's a student, they're trying to take away those tidbits of, how to network or how to start networking, how to grow their personal brand, maybe break in, have that niche to get into sports. Or maybe it's an executive trying to hear, like, hey, what did you do at this business? Or hey, how did you maybe transition to a different career? Or even just maybe how your thought process is. You never really know how that then applies to someone else. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, Barney. This was fantastic. Unless there's anything else you have to share, I really appreciate it.
No, yeah. I appreciate you having me, and I mentioned beforehand you have a lot of heavy hitters on the pod before, and including my old boss Nat Harden. So I wanted to make sure I was living up to the big names and stuff. And like I said, I'm always happy to help and give advice, because I was given the same opportunities, and I was given advice and was able to network through people. So for me, it's always happy to help. And everyone talks about the next generation of people. It makes me feel so old that I would be able to do that. But yeah, no, I'm always happy to help. And you never know what opportunities and what connection can do for you. And for me, it's led to multiple cities, multiple organizations, amazing memories, and hopefully created a lot of memories for other people, which is always key.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I think that's the end for episode 136. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Varney as well for coming on. And yeah, stay tuned for next Tuesday's episode. All the best.